My name is Jaša. I'll be talking about how V4 DEXs will change the LPing and yield farming. Who's here heard about Uniswap version 2? Just by show of hands. Okay. What about version 3? Version 4? I still have some people who kind of know this. So I'll do a quick explanation for those who don't. Version 2 allows people to provide liquidity and others to trade upon it. How the price is calculated is between the ratio of the assets in the pool. So let's say we have 10,000 USDC in the pool and 5 Ethereum. The price of Ethereum would be $2,000. So hopefully that's not happening right now. Hopefully we're a bit higher. In version 3, the difference is in version 2, you provide liquidity in the floor range from 0 to almost infinity. In version 3, you provide it in a specific range, which gives more capital efficiency. If I provide $5,000 in a full range from 0 to infinity, that's going to be spread a lot. In version 3, it's going to be spread in a certain range, and those $5,000 can be traded only in that range, which means that more liquidity can be traded, meaning lower slippage on trades. Well, then comes version 4 Uniswap. There's a lot of new nuances on version 4 Uniswap. First of all, we have a singleton contract. In the old versions, every pool that's created on Uniswap has its own smart contract, which means, let's say we have Ethereum USDC pool. That would be one smart contract. We would have BTC USDC pool. That's another smart contract. Now, if we want to, for example, go from Ethereum to BTC, and let's say we only have these two pools, what happens is we would have to send in Ethereum into the first pool, make the swap, USD goes to the next pool, to USDC BTC pool, make another swap there, and then BTC gets transferred out. So we have 3 transactions happening with token transfers. Ethereum goes in, USDC gets sent to this second contract, and BTC goes out. If we were to do that in Uniswap version 4, because we have the singleton contracts, it means that all the tokens from all the pools is in one contract. So I send Ethereum in, all the swap logic happens in the same contract, and BTC gets sent out. That basically reduces the gas fees, especially on Ethereum, where the gas fees could be quite cumbersome for a lot of users, especially if we're doing like a lot of hops between swaps. Then we also have flash accounting. What's flash accounting? It's basically you can bundle transactions together. So let's say you have only Ethereum, but you want to provide liquidity in Ethereum USDC pool. What flash accounting would do, it would allow you to do a swap and providing liquidity in one transaction. And this also kind of benefits with gas fees that they're lower. We have some other features, like you can have whatever fee you want. Currently, there are only 3 options for fees, 0.05%, 0.3%, or 1%. With Uniswap version 4, you can have basically any fee. You also have like Ethereum native support, but most important thing is the hooks, and that's basically the innovation of Uniswap V4, and all other DEXs are also basically doing some sort of hooks. So let's talk about hooks. What are they? They're basically like, you can imagine them as plugins to the pools. You can attach additional logic on top of the pools, and it's kind of enforced. So imagine them as a smart contract that introduces logic to swaps or providing liquidity. They can either be enforced before swap, after swap, before withdrawal, after withdrawal, before deposit, after deposit. So why would somebody want to have hooks in their pools? Well, you can do awesome stuff like you can do order book AMMs. You could do streaming swaps, or TWAMM. You could do real yield, POL, governance directly on top of the pool. You could even connect to other protocols like Torchain, which is a completely different network through their smart contracts. You could build a whole protocol on top of hooks, because basically they're just smart contracts. So at Brokkr, we kind of got a grant from Uniswap Foundation for building the first hooks, to kind of make some prototypes to start building them, because Uniswap is launching Q3 this year, hopefully with no delays. And they're going to need some hooks to kind of show and for community to start using. We built liquidity locking and incentives hook, which basically locks the liquidity in a full range, and the users who lock their liquidity are not only rewarded by the fees from the pool for swapping, but they're also incentivized by some external means, which has been happening in DeFi all along, but now instead of having to have a third party, you can have it directly on top of the pool. And we built dynamics fees based on volume. Because the Uniswap version 4 now allows any fee tier to be possible, what we did is we used volume as proxy for volatility, and in times of high volume, we increase the fee, and when there's no volume, we decrease the fee. Then we also built a liquidity management hook, which is kind of like the first prototype of protocols being built on top of hooks, so directly on top of pools. And then we also connected liquidity locking and dynamic fees to kind of show how these hooks can be combined, because combining hooks on its own may seem easy, but when we were connecting liquidity locking, which is working with providing liquidity, and dynamic fees, which works only on swaps, there were already some issues how to combine them, because both hooks use something that Uniswap calls partial swaps, and we had to enable or disable them based on the needs of the hook at that time. So, what does all of these hooks mean for LPs and the farmers? Well, first of all, because we have a lot of these awesome hooks that try to incentivize liquidity providers, we will have liquidity incentives, which we already built as a hook, but there can be numerous ways how these liquidity incentives could work. They could be something that's just from protocol wants to incentivize with their own token. They can have a treasury somewhere that kind of says, hey, we're going to put 10,000 USDC every day in here, and LPs get that, and so on. You could have dynamic fees. Dynamic fees should make LPing more profitable, because currently it's very stale. If there's a lot of volatility happening and no volume, basically liquidity providers are losing money. And with the dynamic fees, you can kind of at least mitigate that, so that it's not always just, hey, I'm LPing, I'm losing money, why should I even do that? You could have one of the biggest topics this time is like reduced LVR MEV. So currently MEV is quite heavily still affecting DeFi. And with hooks, you can at least mitigate that to a certain degree, if not completely remove the MEV. One of the most common things that happens is that the price in a swap in one block can be different. So let's say there's an arbitrager or sandwich attacker. They will pay enormous amounts of gas fee to kind of come in before me, get a better price, and then sell after me. And that's only possible because the first swap and my swap, which would be the second in this case, have a different price. With hooks, you could create a system where everybody has the same price. So you could really reduce the MEV a lot. And because there's less funds being extracted from these pools, it also benefits the LPers. And you could also do some farming strategies. So let's say in version 3, you provide liquidity in a certain range. There's a lot of liquidity that it's not being used. That's like at very small range, let's say for Ethereum from $100 to $1,000, which currently is not being used, or from 10,000 upwards. You could have a hook on top of it that provides liquidity in, let's say, ETH, and it gets additional yield. When it's needed, it gets back into the hook, into the pool. All right, so with all of these interesting things that you can build on top of it, we will most likely have a better farming experience. So we will have very diverse hooks built. Currently, it's still unknown what hooks will prevail, but we can assume that there will be a lot of different testings and experiments, and that people will try to be competitive between, like, use our pool, because some of these hooks might be very beneficial for swappers and LPers, but they might also take a small fee for that. That's why there will be a lot of competition between them. We will use a lot of various tools that will attract volume and liquidity. For example, you could create a hook that has an order book flow. So instead of having a normal swap, maybe a lot of users, because they're used from centralized exchanges, they will want to have order books, and that will be very attractive. You could have something like TWAMM, so basically instead of doing one big swap, you do 20 small swaps in a certain time period, and that kind of reduces the slippage. You basically do a trade, wait for the arbitrage to fix the price, do a small trade, and so on, and that can also be built on top of hooks, which should give us improved results and transparent results. Everything's happening on chain, and all of these swappers are coming because there's something interesting for them, and the liquidity providers can have better fee capture. Of course, with all of this, there's going to be positives and negatives. Positive is that you can, as a liquidity provider, you can select from many different options. Currently, you can just go version 2, version 3, or different fee tiers. So 3 fee tiers and 2 versions that are 6 options, and there's not even 6 pools usually on a single asset. We believe that all liquidity will go to version 4. Why? Because version 4 is essentially version 3 Uniswap with some additional features and hooks. So if you want to have a version 3 pool, you basically deploy a pool without a hook. You'll still have the singleton contract benefits. You still have the flash accounting benefits. Or if you want version 2 pool, basically you just deploy a pool that whenever somebody deposits, it forces him to deposit into a full range. So basically it's like version 2 Uniswap. But again, you get all the benefits from version 4 with all the gas optimizations. So those are the good parts. The bad parts are we will have a lot of pools. First thing is that we will have a lot of UI issues because different hooks can have different inputs that they will need. For example, if we only compare version 2 and version 3, the liquidity providing with version 2, you just say, I want to deposit this amount. With version 3, I want to deposit this amount in this range, right? So if you build on a lot of interesting hooks on top of that, it could be, I would need to deposit this amount in this range and stop loss at this price and take profit at this price, right? You immediately get the UI issues. There's going to be hard to find the best farm, especially in the beginning, because there's going to be so much farms, there's going to be a certain fight for liquidity. In the first weeks, there's not going to be like really good track record and data for that. If you provide liquidity into a pool that has been existing for 3 days, but it has insane gains, in the next week it could be like, it's not really performing that well. And then there's a lot of interference that can happen between hooks. So you could have issues with when hooks when you're deploying them, when you have community-built hooks, how do you connect them together so that they don't mess anything up when interacting in swaps or providing liquidity? And there's going to be constant updates. So let's say there's like, we already established the best hooks are this and this and this, and they work on the pools. Then somebody comes along and says, hey, I have an idea for a new hook. They develop this awesome new hook, and suddenly everybody wants that hook as well. What does it happen? Do we update the old hook into the old pools? Could there be some compatibility issues? Do we open a new pool and so on? So there's going to be a lot of kind of like iterations. It's not like in version 2 and version 3, you deploy a pool, this is the fee, it works the best, let's go. In version 4, it's going to be a lot of more experimentation. And that will lead to fragmented liquidity. We're already in fragmented liquidity in, let's say we have different blockchains, we have different protocols, different DEXs, and all of them kind of are fighting for liquidity. Like a lot of progress wants to also be made on, I want to use liquidity already here and put it here as well so that we can also both benefit from the liquidity. But if we have all these pools, the liquidity is basically very fragmented. So at the beginning, when Uniswap version 3 launches, we will have a testing period when we went from version 2 to version 3, there was a small period where everybody kind of transferred to version 3. But there it was easier. If you had liquidity in version 2, you just said, hey, I'm going to take the same pool, take it into the same fee structure. So let's say you had in Ethereum USDC 0.3% pool. I'm just going to move that into version 3, and I'm going to put everything in the full range, or maybe some small amounts into small range or mid range to kind of test it out, and then I'll adapt my strategy. But that was a very simple move. Here is going to be, I think this hook looks cool. I want to provide an order book hook. I want to provide where streaming swap happened. I want to have dynamic fees, and all of this liquidity will be very fragmented at the beginning. But over time, we will see that all of this liquidity will flow to the pools that are the most profitable. So some hooks, of course, are going to be more profitable for the liquidity providers. Some will better accommodate the swappers, and those that kind of combine the best hooks together, those will kind of prevail. Now, it won't be that there's a set of hooks that every pool will use, because also pools themselves are different. You can have a pool that's between two big coins, Ethereum and BTC. You could have something that's on meme coins or very small coins with low liquidity. Different hooks will be better on those pools. You could also have, for example, stable coins which might use completely different hooks. So over time, we will see kind of aggregation of all the pools, and eventually we will still have iterations because new hooks will come out, but eventually we should have a small set of pools that are going to be much more efficient than what we have today. And that's it. Thanks for listening. My name is Jaša. I work at Brokkr Finance. We do ALM, so automated liquidity management, and we're also doing hooks. If you're interested, you can scan the QR code, and if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time. We have a question over there.
Thank you. So I basically have one question. What about exploits? What about dangers? As you know, the main criticism of hooks is exactly that they increase the risk of exploits. So from the perspective of the customers, how do you protect them?
So that's a very good question. Especially, we have a lot of community hooks that could be built. And if a random developer builds a hook, they could do something malicious, like if you withdraw liquidity from this pool, send it to my wallet. That could be a logic that you could implement. So one of the big things is that there's going to be hooks provided by Uniswap. There's going to also be hooks that are kind of embraced by protocols. For example, we're working closely together with Algebra DEXs, and we're kind of the hook creator for them. All of those are going to be audited, which will be a big thing, because audit at least says that it's not like future, like completely proof, 100% safe, but it at least says, hey, these guys will not send the funds out. But otherwise, I think it's basically the same as all other protocols. At the beginning, you also had lending and borrowing protocols, and you kind of had to trust, okay, they're audited, but I still need to trust them. And over time, the hooks will also be proven. You will have some hooks that are new, and people will be like, I'm going to wait a little bit with my liquidity in this pool because it's safe. But over time, we'll just see kind of like standardized hooks that are being used all over the pools. All right, one more question there.
What about the swapper's perspective? So right now, I just use aggregators.
Mm-hmm.
How will aggregators... I mean, their life's going to be much more complicated because they will probably have to curate the pools. Or do you see the future where basically aggregators have an easy job to just pick the applicable ones algorithmically and use all of them, given the exploits question and stuff like that?
Yeah, so regarding swappers, there is going to be a big issue already in the UI, as I already mentioned before, but if you're using aggregators, probably they will have to curate the pool somehow. They will need to limit themselves to, hey, we're not using everybody, because exploits could be a big issue. The other thing is that the Uniswap itself will still do some sort of like pathing, routing, right? But again, a big issue that's still being kind of, the last details in version 4 are being figured out. But for aggregators, that's going to be a big question, even if you are doing only AMM swaps then, or do you have order books separately, or do you combine them? Because it's going to be hard to combine them, right? There's going to be a lot of development on aggregators in this perspective to get you the best fee. One thing that I would say regarding this in general is there's a lot of things that are kind of like going towards seekers and searchers that kind of try to find you the best thing. For example, Uniswap X allows this, that you can be a seeker and searcher and provide the best output for swappers. So you don't have to even care on which pool you're swapping. They will take care of the swap. So I think Uniswap X has a pretty good thing going here, and I think that's the main goal, thing how it's going to go. All right, I think that's out of time. Thank you very much. I mean, if we have time, the timer is at 0, but sure, okay.
Hey, I have a question back here. Great presentation. Are the hooks on a pair immutable? Because it sounded like you mentioned that there could be discussion around updating the hooks, but obviously that'd be a nightmare.
Yeah.
For example, aggregators, like you just changing the hooks. So how does that work?
So there's a couple of ideas flowing around. One is basically all these smart contracts can be upgradable with OpenZeppelin upgradability in import. So basically you can change the logic somewhere, like we point the logic to this smart contract, now we'll just change the logic is in this smart contract. That's not the best way, that can be done at any time. Probably there's going to be some time locks at the beginning, but usually what you could do is you could remove or add hooks to the pool, depends on how you code them. The pool deployers will most likely not be random people. There will be probably protocols that deploy pools. So you will still need to trust the deployers to a certain degree. However, if you wanted, you could create a pool that's non-ungradable. So you could just say, hey, we're going to have this pool forever. If there's a better pool or better hook coming along, we're going to deploy another pool instead of using the old one.
Thank you for the presentation. Just one question. Could you make auto-compounding hooks and basically make protocols like B4 or the likes obsolete?
Yeah, so basically you could create any sorts of strategy or protocol on top of it, right? So basically you can build a whole protocol on top of it as long as it fits in the smart contract. You could even take the smart contract and connect it to other smart contracts, as I said before, with AIF, right? You can say, hey, let's withdraw this and deposit into AIF. So, for example, auto-compounding would be quite simple. Every time somebody withdraws or deposits liquidity, just auto-compound the things. But it also depends, for example, on version 3, that's a little bit harder because everybody has its own unique position. On version 2, where everybody is in full range, so if you create a hook that enforces full range, that's like very simple. That should be 5 minutes of work. Basically, you just copy-paste the code that already exists. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good stay in Split.